Afternoon, everyone. Great to see all of you, and welcome to the 8th, and it is amazing to me to say the 8th annual Building Bridges Dual Credit Conference. That is amazing for me to say that. As Sue mentioned a couple of seconds ago, I am Art Valdespino, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the conference. Today's pre-conference title is called The Role of Online Facilitators, a Variety of Perspectives. And today we'll have an opportunity to talk about the role of facilitators, what exactly it is that goes into that. And so we'll hopefully be able to answer a lot of questions that you may have. Before we begin, we are going to ask if you would please to keep in mind that the session will be recorded. So if anything comes up, just go ahead and let us know in that regard. There is a chat box that is currently open. You are free to start posting questions in that at any point. In fact, if you'll click on it now, at the top, you will see the click of the sign-in sheet so you can receive faculty development credits. If you click on that, that'll be the very first thing. You might have to scroll up just a little bit, but it is there. So please go ahead and take care of that. We're also going to ask if you would please to keep your microphones on mute. There will be plenty of opportunities for you guys to go ahead and to ask questions and to interact with everyone as the session goes on. If anything, I think we were ready to go right into our PowerPoint. Am I correct, Sue?
I think so.
And let us open that up. Load it up.
Okay, well, thank you, Art, and
Yes,
thanks
ma'am.
everybody for attending. We usually, when we have a conference session in our normal times when we're face to face, we usually have a facilitator workshop that's really geared toward facilitators only, and maybe some administrators would attend, but we were really hoping for a kind of a broader group of people to talk about facilitation. We've gone through quite a year and a half, and I think we've had some challenges, certainly with online instruction, and so we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some things that we don't normally talk about. And so, Lorena, if you would go to the next slide. So here's a session agenda. I'm Sue Selk, and I'm going to be doing some background information. We thought it would be kind of fun to talk just a little bit about how did we get here? Why do we have facilitators? And maybe some of the challenges. And then we're going to go into facilitator perspectives. And we do have one facilitator that Brian Liznacki, I think is how you say his last name, from Cathedral. I believe he's not going to be here, but we do have Donna Cienez right here, who's dual credit speech and the CTA department chair at El Dorado High School. So we're happy to have her here. And then Art and I are going to talk a little bit more about our perspectives, how we see facilitation as dual credit instructors, because we do teach online sections for dual credit. And then we will be having both Marco Ortigosa, who's criminal justice and assistant professor for EPCC, and has had a lot of other hats too, formerly at Cathedral High School. And he's had quite a bit of experience with the facilitating and coordinating dual credit classes. So Brendan was supposed to join in on that also, but it's going to be Art and Marco. And then closing remarks and any questions you might have. And remember, you can always have questions in the chat too. So let's begin. Lorena, next slide. Back when we first started with dual credit in earnest, I want to say, 2010. I think we started more like 2000. Uh-oh. What is happening?
So your video is a little frozen.
We can hear you, but yeah, your video is frozen. Give her a second, see if she can jump back in. If not, then I will continue for Sue. All right, that's not a problem. She'll jump right back in, and not a problem. So a little background on the role of facilitators. I believe Sue mentioned that dual credit goes back to 2010, at least in terms of online roles. I know that dual credit's been around a little bit longer than that. I used to teach high school, and I remember having those conversations right before I left the secondary level, so in 2005. But as far as the online role is concerned, the need for facilitators came in pretty quickly. And in essence, what happened was there was a series of guidelines put together by the Dual Credit Standing Committee, which still exists, designed to serve, designed to give everybody some background and some direction, especially in terms of what it was exactly that needed to be done. There's also a requirement that says that anytime a school offers an online section, facilitators are required to be part of the class. That's actually part, as it says here, of the agreement, the MOU. And it's really important, not just in terms of having someone in the room for the students, but someone who can serve a bit of as an extension for us as faculty. You'll get a better opportunity to explore that as we talk about it a little bit later. At the same time, there are now procedures in place to help facilitators understand their role, but not just that, but also to understand the importance of who they are within the structure of dual credit. So there's a facilitator handbook that is given to all facilitators. We encourage them to go through that and to know the intricacies of it, excuse me. But they're also given developments or faculty development during orientation. So they actually get a chance to go through all of that. They get a chance to see how the process works and to have a better understanding of, like as I mentioned earlier, their role within the context of dual credit. So a little background on that, just to give you guys some idea on that. Lorena, if you want, you can go to the next slide. I don't recall. Is this part of Sue's talk?
Yes, I think Sue's back in.
Is she?
Sue should be back. Yeah.
I am. I'm here on my phone.
There you are, Sue.
Yeah, and so I apologize for my phone, and it might go sideways. I need to put my earbuds in here. Sorry about that.
Hey, so I took care of the background. Okay.
Oh, okay. And what did you say about the background? Because I have a few other things to say.
Then we'll go into that, but I followed each of the bulleted points as best I could.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, and I think the point that I was trying to make with all of this is that, you know, when we realized that we were going to have online instruction because we had so few dual credit teachers in the high schools, we had to make sure that the students were supported in the labs and in the classroom if that's where they were doing it with their laptops. And so we created a lot of the infrastructure and including the handbook, which is being revised, and orientations and all of those kinds of things. And we made sure that we had, they were all included in the partnership agreements and the memos, memorandums of understanding for the early college high schools and for the comprehensive schools. And one of the other things that we did, and I'm not sure if this was on a slide or not, I had it written on my notes, is during that time, there was a lot of creation of a lot of things. So we were creating forms and enrollment processes and, you know, textbook processes and all kinds of things. And one of the things that came out of that also was the formulation of some forms for enrollment. One of them being the enrollment roster form, which is such an important form that because of the pandemic has it hasn't gone by the wayside, but for some schools, we sure hope that they'll start using those roster forms again, because that's where the facilitators are identified. That's where their contact information is. And it's very hard to find those people. I mean, it can be done, but you know, we don't know what schools students come from unless they're on an enrollment roster form, because we don't have access to Banner as instructors like a counselor would have. And so some of these forms were put in place so we could easily identify facilitators. And I guess that kind of can take us to the challenges. Lorena, if you can. And I'm sorry for my cameramanship here because I'm holding my phone as I do this. So in recent years, we've had some challenges, both facilitators and for instructors. Certainly one of the things that has been difficult for facilitators, especially those facilitators that have been with us for quite a while, was the fact that they lost access as a guest to Blackboard when we went to single sign-on um, um, as a college, because facilitators right now don't have they don't have a designation like a dual credit instructor has that is in the high school. They're volunteer faculty. And so they don't have an ID number. Facilitators don't have an ID number. And that was kind of a difficulty that came because of this single sign-on. We are working on it. The pandemic has slowed us down in that effort. But I think we are really trying to, as a college, and Dr. Pena in Human Resources is working with us too, so that he can get some designations for facilitators and change the designation for instructors also, more to fit with what he thinks is needed. And so hopefully that's something that will be coming. Also, one of the things that has become really apparent, not just for facilitators, but also just in the dual credit world, is that we really do live in two worlds, right? I mean, we have the EPCC world and we have the high school world, and I see Donna nodding. You know, I mean, and you have to, if you are a facilitator and or an instructor or both, dual credit instructor in the high schools, you have to navigate these two worlds. And sometimes we don't understand as EPCC people, we don't necessarily understand how things will be working for you in the school, and you maybe don't understand what works for how things work for us at EPCC. So one example that I was kind of referring to before was that enrollment roster form. Because it is so important to us, when we don't have that, it really is difficult for us if the form isn't filled out completely, if students aren't added, or whatever it may be, that can really cause some difficulties for us. And so we're hoping that now, since things are normalizing a little bit and people are going back to using those forms, it will be something that it gets a little bit better. I know that it's not going to be a perfect world. We also have some differences in expectations. Obviously, in the high school world, and if you're a facilitator, you're also probably a high school teacher, and you will be talking to parents. That's part of your job. It's something that's normal for you. But of course, as a dual credit instructor, that's not part of our normal role. And so depending, and when Marco and Art and Donna talk about their roles, they might address this a little bit, but it really is, it's a difference that sometimes can be a problem, because there is an expectation that the dual credit instructor is going to be addressing the parents, and that's really not something that we see as our role. So sometimes it's nice that the facilitator can kind of fulfill that role, and you guys can talk a little bit more about that. It also depends on what the role of the facilitator is in the high school. I mean, in an ideal world, and I don't know if Art talked about this, but when we first started this, our expectation that would always be a highly qualified certified teacher that was a facilitator, but that just didn't work, right? Because we have smaller schools that don't have, they don't have teachers that are going to be available to do that. They're going to have staff and other people take on that role, coaches take on that role. And so sometimes that limits the way in which those people can engage as a facilitator too. Or they might be facilitating 4 classes at once, right? So we know that can be a challenge. And then there's just those differing expectations related to the roles on the part of the instructor and the facilitator. And that's something that Donna is going to address right now, I think, or at least talk a little bit about her experiences. And then after that, we'll hear from Art, and I will talk a little bit about how we see our roles. So Donna, did you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you. If you all have any questions as I speak to you, please ask, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me for this conference. What I wanted to give you just a few tips that I wrote down, things that I felt I should share with you that I often came across. At El Dorado High School, we have the early college. And what we have to keep in mind is if you are in the same situation, you have eighth graders becoming now college students. And so when you have a situation such as it is about helping our students navigate through college. These are very new experiences for them. So sometimes they may struggle with something as simple as logging on to Blackboard, or even finding a textbook that may be embedded in Blackboard. So especially on the very beginning stages, please work with your students and ask them if they found the textbook, the main tools that they need in order to be successful within the course. I also found it very important that one, communicate with the professors. I think it's easier than them trying to locate you. So as soon as the students are able to log into Blackboard, I mean, every day you check with them, they will right away have a syllabus available with the professor's information. And of course, start emailing your professor. In the past, I've exchanged my telephone number with them, and they've been, they've also have given me their number, but really through email, it's the best way to do things. Let's see, what else can I say? Oh, when it comes to the rosters, they tell us at the very beginning, please make sure your roster matches up to the EPCC roster on Banner. So that was something that I also had to do with the professors, just to make sure that, our roster matched with the professor. So these are like little checkpoints that you have to do. I found that throughout this experience, one of the great things that, I had to not worry about was grading. But that doesn't mean that we are just off the hook and, we don't have to do our part. It's very important that we monitor again to make sure that the students have the tools. Some of those things are the simplest things you probably take for granted that they don't know how to use. I also remember helping a lot of my students get the tech support number, how to find information for them to be able to get back on in case Blackboard blocked them out. I even had a PowerPoint to get that put together that I believe it was the tech support provided for me on how to clear their browsing history. So sometimes students don't know something as simple as if you do not log off completely, Blackboard may block you out completely. And so when you find those little tips, it can make a whole difference on having to get in, and it causes less frustration for the students. I think it's also very important to speak to parents when you have those, open house moments, and let them know you're not the professor for the course. You are the facilitator. Let them know what the role is. I remember talking to some of my some of my parents, letting them know if there were any questions in regard to their son or daughter and their academic progress that they needed, or the student had to communicate with the professor. I explained the FERPA policy, in which professors do not have to answer to you when they are off campus or high school campus. So those were very important roles to explain. I know in my campus, one of the main things that I was told to do was to take accurate attendance, but also to make sure that I did everything possible to get our students passing. So from time to time, I would monitor, see how their grades were, progressing. I also found it very important to remind each other. We would talk at the beginning of each week, what are the assignments? What are the quizzes? What do we need to do for this week? And we had those conversations among the students and myself. We made the list, put it on the chat box if it was through virtual meeting, or we would write it down, through Schoology, whatever it was. And, again, a reminder, some of our students will forget. And it was a great way to just check and make sure everybody stayed on target. Let's see, what else? I think also knowing about posting grades at the end, be aware that there is a conversion chart. Don't panic with it, ask for help. There's always somebody willing to help you out. But there is a conversion chart that once the grades are given to you, A, B, C, whatever it is, that's how you post the grades, on your end. Let's see. I think those are the main things that I can think of. If you were a professor already, it makes a whole world of a difference in helping our students navigate through Blackboard, because you're already familiar with it. And also, I think it's important that, as a facilitator, help our students communicate with the professors when needed through EPCC, letting them know, these are simple things, but letting them know how to address the professors, what are the questions that they may have, and so forth. I found it overall to be a great experience. I facilitated for 2 semesters, and the professors were wonderful, communicated well, and the students knew what they were doing. As we progressed through, they did, better and better each time. Again, at the beginning, we're basically, especially if you have 8th graders becoming college students, from 8th grade to college is a big jump, and that's something that we have to keep in mind, and letting our students know that they can be successful, but at the same time, letting them know, the responsibilities of a college student, and I think that will help. Does anybody have any questions? I hope I didn't ramble too much.
This is Sue. You didn't ramble at all. I was busy I ended up getting onto my iPad, and there were a couple of questions that I was going to ask you, but I think you answered those. I mean, I think you were in a unique position because you are a dual credit instructor and teach college courses for dual credit. And then on top of it, you were what was it you were facilitating?
I was facilitating psychology.
Okay.
1301, I think it was.
Okay. Interesting. So you have those 2 perspectives.
Yes.
And I thank you for that. Were there any questions from anybody?
I posted a question in the chat. Is there something you wished us EPCC instructors would know, would maybe communicate a little better? It's just something that may not be on our radar that's really important to the high school side.
Let's see. Quite frankly, I think I guess if the facilitator does not advocate as much, I mean, I'm not shy. I think people know that already. But maybe sharing your syllabus at the beginning and just knowing that, you're available to answer any questions. However, I asked my professors that I was working with, and they were wonderful. They shared the syllabus and just any changes that were coming up. But no, I mean, we had open lines of communication, and that helped a lot.
So reaching out and keeping that contact throughout the semester.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. I think you'll probably communicate more at the very beginning. And then, towards the middle, there's not that much communication needed unless there's changes within whatever assignments may be going on. But at the end, again, you start communicating to see how the progress is going with our students. And sometimes, students might ask you about assignments or maybe on postings. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? Sometimes we feel like we've already released an assignment on Blackboard and it's not there according to the syllabus. Those are the kind of things that I came across. But I mean, it's even happened to me as an instructor where I thought I had made it available and I had not. And so, but other than that, the experiences I had were great. The professors kept up with their grading as they should. And, the students did well. I think probably the biggest thing was there were maybe a couple of students that needed a little more pushing. Again, being a high school teacher, kind of and being the facilitator, our administrators put a lot of pressure on us and making sure we do everything possible to help these students succeed and pass. So it's not like your typical professor on campus where, you know, the responsibility is solely on the student. At the high school, they still see the professors, the dual credit professors, as being responsible in making sure that the students do everything they can to pass. So it's very different. And sometimes it's contacting parents. So as a facilitator, from time to time, I did have to contact parents to let them know, you know, your son, daughter is not showing passing grades right now. So yes, sometimes you'll ask the students, you know, can I see a picture of your grades? And, you know, and, or I tell the parents, this is the best way to do it. Tell the parents how they can actually see their child's grades without actually violating FERPA. And, you know, you can ask your child, and this is the way you log in and so
Absolutely.
forth. And you're kind of putting it on the child and the parent. And so then the parents will find out, okay, you know, what can I do to make sure my child does their part? Now, when I was the facilitator, this was during COVID and everything was virtual. So I only had a few students on campus that I could really monitor. But other than that, I mean, when I spoke to parents, you know, please make sure this is what you do and this is how you can get a hold of their grades and look at them. I mean, it made a big difference. I just had one parent that was upset that her child had low grades, and she contacted the professor, even though I had told her no, it was his responsibility. So sometimes those are the kind of things that we have to step in. And the professor did tell the parent, you know, according to FERPA, you know, your child is supposed to get a hold of me and so forth. What I did as the facilitator, I did tell the student, you need to contact your professor, you know, may I help you? You know, do you need any help? Like how to get her email? Although he had all the information, sometimes you have to ask him, you know, do you know the email address? And how would you write your email? What are your questions of concern? That's how I help. But other than that, I mean, he ended up passing the course, but it was a struggle. And again, it wasn't so much the professor, it was actually the student, you know, not being ready for the responsibility. Sometimes what happens in our dual credit courses is that students don't necessarily sign up for them, but the parents want them in the courses, even though the students are not mature or they don't want to take on the responsibility. So something that we have to keep in mind, but like on my district, my campus, that's not an excuse. We still have to push as hard as we can to help these students get back on track.
That's really a great answer, and it was a great insight too. And it made me think of something that I had forgotten before. You were talking to parents, and it really, I was glad to see that you were able to handle that and let them know that it really is their child. I mean, it's the student really. They need to encourage their children, their students, to become independent learners and to kind of stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves, right? And it's really great that you saw your role as a facilitator as somebody who would do that. You know, our challenge too, and it was something I was going to mention, I think I was a little freaked out with the whole computer thing here. It's the sharing of progress is really something that we as dual credit instructors want to do with the students, not necessarily with the facilitator. I mean, sometimes we're not obligated to do that, right? And I think there sometimes is an expectation that all of the grades will be shared, and that really, that kind of depends on the relationship, which we can address in a minute. And then, of course, final grades. We really are not supposed to share final grades with the facilitator. That's something that the students can see their grades, and then the school has people that have access to their dashboards, and they can get those final grades from the dashboard. So that's another expectation sometimes that causes a little difficulty between facilitators and instructors. Okay, well, I think maybe we need to move on now. Donna, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Yeah, yay. And I promised Art that I would actually start off this part in terms of the roles that, because Art and I both have had quite a bit of experience in teaching college courses for dual credit online. And so we've had a variety of experience with facilitators. I was going to let him take the lead more, but I guess I'll start and then he can jump in. Currently, I have a relatively long-term relationship with one facilitator, and I don't think I'll name names, but I think it's a very good relationship. We have settled into kind of a routine. He understands that I probably, as I just told Donna, am not going to share progress every single grade. Students have access in Blackboard. They have at least 2 grades a week. They can show their parents, they can show their facilitators. It is not a violation of FERPA for a facilitator, now that we're back in the classroom or the lab, to look over a shoulder and take a look at a student's grades. They work for the school. It's perfectly within their right to do that. And so he understands kind of where I stand on that, but we do definitely communicate anytime a student is in trouble or having any kind of concern. He's great about talking to parents about that. And he's always, very willing to reach out to me if he sees a concern. And so we've had kind of this, I don't want to say scripted, but it's a relationship where we kind of know the ground rules. And then sometimes you don't know who your facilitator is because of some of the things that I talked about previously. And I might not hear from a facilitator until midway, and they want to know how a student is doing. Some of them, I know that their role is perhaps a counselor or a librarian, or they're somewhere else in the school, and they're just filling in and doing this role, I don't want to say temporarily, but it's definitely not at the top of their list in terms of all their duties. And so I know to contact them if I feel a student is having a problem, and I usually really don't hear from them unless they think that students are in trouble and maybe need to drop the course or something. So I think there's just you have to kind of decide what the roles are going to be and build a relationship over time. I do think that it can be very frustrating. I know this particular person is a certified highly qualified teacher in the speech area, and I'm teaching speech, and I think that's got to be kind of difficult, right? That this is your subject area, but because he's not credentialed, and maybe someday he will be, which would be great, that he has to kind of, and these are my words, not his, maybe take a little bit of a back seat, because he really could be teaching some of this stuff, but can't, right? Because I'm the credentialed and I'm the teacher of record. So I sometimes think that might be a little frustrating, and he's never mentioned that, but it would just be something that I would think might be the case. Art, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'll speak in somewhat general terms, because I'll be speaking again in a few minutes in the next section as well. I don't want to repeat myself. But I do want to piggyback on something that Sue's talked about. I'll give you a little background very quickly into how long I've been teaching online. It's at least 5 years. You do it for so long, you forget how many, to be very honest with you. But I've been doing it for a while. Much like Sue mentioned, I do have a very good and consistent relationship with one specific facilitator. Same thing, she'll go nameless, but it's been a great relationship overall. But I also have had experiences with other schools, other facilitators, and everything is kind of hit or miss at times. And regardless of all of that, the one thing that Sue talked about that is paramount above anything else is to communicate. And I think communication is key in any relationship, not just between faculty and the facilitator, or faculty and students, or whatever, but to have dialogue between the two. So part of my role at the college is I am the coordinator for English. So any online sections that are created or they're requested at any high school in El Paso that are online, they come through me. And as Sue mentioned earlier in her discussion with the ERF, on that list is the facilitator for each individual class. And so I assigned the sections, across the board. Everybody who teaches English online is great. But then I'll end up getting an email from one of the instructors saying, hey, you know what? I can't reach the facilitator. Do you know who it is? and we'll go round and round, and I'll give them this name, or perhaps there's someone else listed in the dual credit office, because the school will change the facilitator, and then I'm not notified of that. So those things happen. So there's this round and round it goes about. But the first thing that runs through my mind, at least with the faculty's end, is once the semester begins, reach out to the facilitator, and most do. Most are very good about that. But at the very least, you establish that line of communication that, as Sue mentioned, really starts to help establish the roles within the context of what's going on. Because you never really know what's happening inside the classroom with these kids. There's all these different types of things that are happening with them. Like I tell my students, we all have lives. We all have things that are way more important that could ever happen within the context of what we teach within our class, right? Even though I struggle with that too. But the reality is that's true. And the facilitator largely is there to take care of all the things that Sue hit on, but to also let us know of anything happening with the student that perhaps could take place outside of the class. There have been numerous occasions in my time in teaching where that has happened. Where, hey, you know what, the student's got this personal problem, or this is going on. You should know that. The student doesn't, feel comfortable sharing it with everybody. Because the reality is we don't really know them all that well. So they're not going to share things with us that they typically would with their teachers, but that they're certainly going to do with the facilitator. And the facilitator can relay that information to us. You know what? That actually makes a big difference when it comes to, the student has just not turned in so many assignments. And you know what? I'm not just going to fail them. There's something going on. Let me reach out. So in the end, it's really all about just communication, making sure that there's an effort on both parts to communicate. And for facilitators, I would actually take that one step further, and I would invite the instructor to come meet the students. Now, I tell the instructors to do that too. Say, when are they there so I can go meet them? But I think that invitation should go both ways. But you know what? Come on over and meet. And it actually makes a big difference to be able to meet face to face, to sit there. And I realize we're in the pandemic, but I actually got a chance to do that. I went and I met my students at Cathedral a couple of weeks ago. So I was able to take care of that. But the point is that it's there. The point is that it's there. So as long as you're able to communicate between faculty members and the facilitators, as long as you're maintaining that, then pretty much the roles take care of themselves, the duties take care of themselves. But more importantly, you're finding out all the things that really need to get done to ultimately help the students.
And that's what it's about, right?
Yeah. It's about them. At least that's what they tell me.
That's right.
Yeah.
If I may add a little bit more too,
Sure.
especially with COVID going on
Absolutely.
right now. Sometimes at the schools, we have students that are going into quarantine and,
Right.
making sure that they also communicate with the professors and, letting the kids know to send those emails to the professors. But sometimes, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen. And that's where we can also step in and just email the professors. I think it's important. Right now, we have a high absence rate due to COVID. But the good thing is that we're now face to face, so we have a better track of what's going on with the kids. But with our students, but definitely we have to encourage our students to advocate for themselves by communicating with the teachers. And then again, we also have to, with the professors, I'm sorry. And then again, we also have to step in and communicate with the professors just in case they're not doing it.
I think that's a great point. And, you made me think of something else too. Another challenge right now is when we first decided on the dates for this conference, we've always had it about around this time, right? But now everybody, it used to be Socorro was the only district really that was on year-round school. Now almost everybody is on year-round school. And so what I wasn't used to was having students question me about whether or not they had to log in during intersession, right? And having to tell them, and the facilitators helped a lot with that because they were new to it too. Some of them were used to it in Socorro district, but not in the other districts. And we don't really have online speech in Socorro anyway because of all you guys who teach it. So, it presented just one more little layer of challenge. Okay, well, do we want to move on, Art, to you and Marco, I guess, or are the two Lone Rangers on this one?
Yeah, so a little background on Marco and I. So Marco does teach, he's a professor with us over at EPCC, but in his first role, when I first met him, He was actually, I'm not sure what the title was there at Cathedral, so you can make it up and make yourself sound all grand, Ben, if you want. But I met him in what is, in essence, amounts to the instructor facilitator role that you typically would see. Marco was in charge of instruction at Cathedral to some degree, like I said, I don't remember his title, so we did meet in that capacity. But he also teaches with us as well online, and so he's got a great insight into both. Marco, I'll tell you what, if you want to share some of those insights in terms of what you got going on, go ahead and start off, man, and I'll piggyback with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I apologize. I think my internet quality right now is not very good. It's really windy over here on the west side, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But so I guess I was in a very unique position. I started at Cathedral back in 2015. I was fresh off grad school, and I took on the role as the director of the dual credit program. That was part of it. It was more than that. But part of my function was as the director of the dual credit program. So I was overseeing all the faculty that we had on campus, as well as creating all the forms that Sue was talking about. I actually had the joke, I guess, that I was dreaming of the day that I would have not had any CRNs or ERFs sent back to me, that they were all perfect. But yeah, that was not the case. And those of you that know, the CRNs were the course request forms, and then the ERFs were the enrollment request forms. And that's where we would put both of them, the facilitator and the students. But so I was in a very unique position because I was teaching as an adjunct at the college. I was serving as a facilitator, but then I was also overseeing the entire dual credit program at Cathedral. So the good thing for me was during that summer that I started at Cathedral, I met Sarela and I met Eddie, two of our professors that gave classes and still give classes at Cathedral. So we developed this relationship where we got along and we started to talk. So when it came time for me to be the facilitator, it became very easy to have that communication with them. And as Donna said, virtually everyone said, communication is key. Because one of the things is something as little as, hey, you know what, students have a football game or they're going off on regionals and they're not going to be present here. Those little details that may not seem important, it's good to relate to the instructor of record. And one of the things that I learned is, as a facilitator, you have to take a step back. I know that sometimes when we serve that dual function of instructor and facilitator, we sometimes want to, go forward and teach and take that, what's in their nature, I guess. But the reality is that our function as facilitator has to be in the backseat, as you had referred to. And what does that look like? Well, you have to oversee the students and you have to look at what their functions are. But at the same time is maintaining that communication. Now, as an instructor, I definitely go and visit all the dual credit students that I have. So I've been to Tornillo, I've been to Clint, and visit the students. And it really makes a difference because one, I get to meet the students and they're like, oh, it's not just individual behind a computer, and you can actually see their smiles. And second, I get to meet the facilitator. And then we get to talk, okay, this is what's going on, which is a complete different ballgame if you have that personal connection. One of the things that I do engage in, or I used to when I was at Cathedral, was I know I cannot ask for grades. FERP was there. However, I would often make sure that the students were, doing well in the class. I would not request grades every week because, well, let's be frank, that's kind of too much for both facilitators and instructors. But there was a time where, it was getting closer to the drop date. And I would send an email saying, hey, is there anyone that I should be worried about? The mathematically it's impossible the individual can pass a course. Because then I would have that conversation with the student of saying, what does it mean to drop versus what does it mean to fail or get a D? And that's a very interesting conversation that you have as a facilitator. And then, of course, with me, it was also as the head of the program. But it's important to establish those communication lines and have that information. between both the facilitator and the instructor. One thing I can say is I really enjoyed my time as a facilitator. You get to really understand and serve a very distinct function that you would as a teacher or a professor. That is very fulfilling. I think I cannot overstate that.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and I completely have to echo everything that Marco said in terms of working with facilitators. I did mention I would go into a bit more specifics because I was going to be speaking here too, but actually, how are we doing on time? Does anybody know?
Well, we're at 5:46, so we have, like 14 minutes left.
Okay.
We're good.
All right, then I will talk for 13 and a half. No,
it's not necessary.
No. Actually, I'll cut straight to the chase in terms of what it is that Marco was talking about, that he alluded to, that Sue alluded to, that Donna alluded to, all these types of things. Oftentimes within the function of dual credit, the facilitator, the role of that can seem almost as if it's secondary, if not arbitrary, all these types of things. And it's not. It is not like that at all. You serve a very clear function within the college. And to be honest with you, the class would not work if you were not there. And so it is rewarding, and it should be rewarding. But that's not going to happen unless you can communicate with the instructor. But that has to go both ways. And what I mean by that is there has to be a great amount of responsibility on our end to make sure that we're reaching out to you too. We can't just reach out to you when something is wrong. It doesn't work like that, right? And that's going to set a bit of a bad message in that context. But regardless, facilitators serve a very huge role within the context of what it is that is being done within dual credit. And I would hope that anybody who's on here right now that's either a facilitator or served in that role felt that in going through it, and felt that in working with the students and working with the faculty and going through each and every single thing. Because even though, as Marco mentioned, your role may be very prescribed in that context, the reality is it just simply doesn't work without you. And there's no getting around that. And so for all of you, thank you. I really hope that you guys enjoy it. I hope it's a lot of fun, and reach out to your faculty, each and every single one of them. It makes a profound difference, again, for the students who are the center of everything that we do, right? So with that, I'll stop my 13 and a half minute spiel.
That was a very concise 13 and a half minutes. Thank you very much. And I guess this has been kind of a quiet crowd here. So I guess one last call for any questions that anybody might have. I noticed that there were a couple of things, and I think it was due to my computer difficulties. So I want to thank you, Art, for standing in for me and doing the slides for me while I got back on. One of the things, we're talking about facilitators and the relationship that we have, and I also talked a little bit about the fact that sometimes it's hard to find out who your facilitator is, and I just wanted to mention that, and we're blaming the pandemic for a lot of things here, but during the pandemic, what happened in the dual credit dean's office, Dean Badillo's office, is that the person who was responsible for keeping track of facilitators, and so that it took a while, but we would be able to find out who they were, because that information actually comes first to the dual credit student services office first. And it takes a while to compile all of it. If we don't, if we get the ARFs, that's one thing, but not everybody gets. Art and I are more privileged because we get those because we are the one who assigns all the classes. And so, Marisol left and moved to California, and her position has stayed frozen during the pandemic. And so we have that function really has been lost. And so on top of a lot of the other challenges that we have, that was another challenge that, that we were met with during the pandemic. But I do think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're having a little bit more help. Thank you, Lorena Gonzalez, in the office, and so hopefully maybe we'll be able to help meet some of these challenges a little bit more. So Lorena, I got the chat, but I have to do something and go away from everything because I'm on my iPad. Do you see anything else?
No, there weren't any questions, but if anybody would like to unmute and ask a question, we have a little bit more time to do so. Any experiences you want to discuss? We have great minds here, great advice.
And
up
and
for grabs.
I know for a fact we have some EPCC online dual credit instructors. I can see their names right here that could share some of their experiences. Should I say names? Maybe not.
If there are no questions, though, we have a short survey, a short evaluation session. The link is in the chat. Anything else, Sue?
Well, what I'd
Yeah.
like to do is thank Donna Sanyas so much. You just gave really great insights, and we really appreciate it. And Marco Ortigosa, I see some little clapping going up. Thank you so much for sharing also. And of course, Art and Lorena. And, you know, thank you for everything that you do. And Art, thank you for kind of picking up the pieces there. I don't know what happened to my computer, but it says I have no internet access, but somehow my iPad has internet access, so I'm not sure what's happening there. And we want to thank all of you too for attending, and I hope that you're able to attend some other sessions in the conference. Tomorrow we have 2 and 2 on Thursday, and then of course on Saturday we have 3 sessions. They're one after another, not concurrent. UTEP and Janine Rudnick will be doing a talk. And then, of course, we have Dr. David Troutman from UT Austin System. So I hope you can join us.
And
how about you, Lorena?
We haven't announced it officially, but there are door prizes. So by attending today, you are all in. We'll pick a winner from this
That's
session
right.
alone. So really good chances of some excellent prizes.
Exactly. And more sessions you attend, more chances for door prizes, right?
Mm-hmm. Some
Okay.
gift cards, movie theater tickets, some good stuff this year.
That's right. Thanks you so much. I guess we're done.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.